Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Did you get to see Doctor Strange yet? Because this is the spoiler review, so there shall be no further warnings. By the way, did you get your popper top when you went? Because I did. I feel like it should be a unboxing. It was just a piece of plastic. You should get one. Guys, the origin was exactly the way that it was supposed to be. Almost like to the very letter, like words in the comic. It was that good. The look was perfect. I mean, aside from little details like the seal of the Shanti being over top of the eye of Agamotto, which I can totally overlook, and I would have actually rather that the cloak of levitation would have had those two little stringy things over top. That would have been epic. But still, how can you complain about how good that look was? Amazing. And his, like I said, his origin story, perfect to a T. Everybody else's origin story, completely different. Seriously, Caecilius? Like, this guy was a nobody. He was a nobody in the comics. He was a servant of Baron Mordo. And now we're going to talk about Mordo. Friggin' hey, man, this guy, forget about it. He was nothing like in the comics. He actually had some kind of purpose, some kind of method to his madness. He wasn't a bad guy. I mean, even at the very end, you know, the final, the after credits scene? Yeah. After he took away that dude's power, forget about it. There was no, I don't necessarily see it as being malice completely, as trying to set things right, trying to fix the balance of everything that's going on. Yes, of course, the bill will come to him too, but he's trying to look to solve the problems of magic. He just didn't like the way that the dark force dimension was being used by the Ancient One that way. And man, that right there was sick. The Ancient One is a Celtic female as opposed to a pre-Tibetan male. I don't see that as being a big deal. More importantly, I'd like to point out something that a lot of people just, people talk, but they don't actually know the comics. Sorry if you're insulted by this, but allow me to set things straight. In the original comic, they came from India, not from Tibet. And in all of the following comics, they were not from Tibet. They were from a place that existed there pre-Tibet. So, with all due respect, seriously, guys, calm down with the whole everything's got to be exactly this way, because no, it doesn't. Plus, honestly, with the storyline, I don't know if I would have wanted to see the comic book version of the Ancient One in this role. I mean, she was actually not that flawless. I mean, the Ancient One of the comics, you could find nothing wrong with this person. I mean, when he passed on, he became one with eternity, essentially. The first human to not have to go to meet Mistress Death, which is amazing. And here, this Ancient One was flawed beyond belief. Wow, like not evil, but clearly flawed. And I loved that. We just talked about Caecilius, who had absolutely nothing to do in the comics, and here all of a sudden he's somebody. Mads Mikkelsen played a very, very good role. I know that there are going to be a bunch of people who are going to say things like, oh, it wasn't very developed. Let me put it this. Compared to the other Marvel villains, Loki aside, this character was extremely well developed. But even just taking the idea, I think that the character was developed enough. We're probably never going to see Caecilius and his henchmen again. Maybe we will, not really sure. If we do, I'm sure it'll be with a good reason. If not, oh well. But I liked the way that he was played. I liked the backstory of it. It wasn't touched on a lot, but there was more than a mention that when he came to Camartage, he was a completely broken man. His whole family had died. Everyone in his family, which, coincidentally enough, sounds a lot like Doctor Strange. I know that very different from in the comics to here. You don't know anything about Doctor Strange's family when you're watching the movie. But in the comics, Strange lost his entire family. Here, Caecilius lost his entire family. And the things he was saying about how life is so, we're all just infinitesimal, and we're nothing, we're specks, and we're meaningless, but there doesn't have to be death anymore. When he was captured by that thing, when Strange was trying to go for the axe, and the cloak of levitation was bringing him over here towards the capture me gear, and he got caught up. I think that was great because after he took the gag off of his mouth, he had a great moment there, knowing that his whole family was killed, and he's sitting there crying, talking about how we don't all have to die. Death doesn't have to exist anymore, like the idea of killing death. I don't know. That's not a particularly developed character. I'm going to disagree. I liked that the seal of the Shanti was everywhere. It was great, and the only places it wasn't at was in the Hong Kong sanctum and in the London sanctum. And guys, that doesn't exist in the comics. That's something that's specifically to the MCU, Earth 199999. But nonetheless, it was great. I like that there are 3 sanctums. I like the idea that the New York sanctum technically never fell, but it was enough that the other 2 were destroyed that we could move on. Speaking as such, the New York Greenwich Village sanctum, we saw Daniel Drum. What a great Easter egg. The idea that Daniel Drum was there and he was killed. Now, this was the first Brother Voodoo, and he was killed in the comics. And then Jericho Drum came along, and now Jericho is the new Dr. Voodoo. And he's able to take the spirit of his brother and hold it within him. And that's like his biggest weapon. If he's fighting someone, he could send his brother's spirit out to go and attack and possess this other enemy over there, along with all the other powers he's got, his levitation, his casting spells, his bolts, all the different things that he could do. That was always his biggest deal. So the idea that he's dead, this leads that we could actually have Brother Voodoo. We could also apparently have Nico Menorah, because Tina Menorah was in this. And I gotta admit, I actually had to look this one up because everything just happened so quickly, and I saw this girl with this ring thing there, and she was so close to the camera. I said, okay, that's got to mean something. And sure enough, looking it up, that was supposed to be Tina Menorah. Look up The Runaways. Nico Menorah, if she cuts herself, then the staff of one activates outside of her, and she's able to use it, and it's extremely powerful. But there were so many little Easter eggs in there. I like that the weapons, the artifacts, actually had the names of certain characters in there, like the Staff of Eternity. That's cool. The boots of the Valtor that Baron Mordo, it's just Mordo, he wasn't a Baron yet, that Mordo was wearing. I loved those boots. I would love to get me a pair of those. I wonder, man, like, does Jordan's name come with those, or are they using somebody else today? Christine Palmer was in this movie. She is one of the many night nurses. Claire Temple isn't the only one, played by Rosario Dawson. Here, Rachel McAdams is playing a night nurse, one of the many versions of the night nurse. And the night nurses are usually not nurses per se, they're doctors. Claire Temple in the comics was a doctor, not a nurse, not a genius nurse like Rosario Dawson plays in the Netflix series. And here we actually have a authentic doctor playing a night nurse. So night nurses are just people who heal heroes when they get hurt, you know, because they can't really go to just any old hospital like Dr. Strange did twice. But I guess he technically belonged there, right? Stan Lee was in there reading a little bit of Albert Camus. That was cool. That was cool. It wasn't a big scene. His scenes are never usually that big. They are always the blink and you'll miss him thing, which is funny because he actually comments on that in a different interview that he does. He says the genius of me being in this movie doubles the money of all of these movies. He says, why? He says, because when my scene comes up, it's so quick that if you blink, you miss it. And everybody goes, oh, and everybody says, what? And they say, oh, Stan Lee. I said, oh no, I was just reaching for my popcorn. And now they got to go and pay for another ticket and see the movie again. So obviously it's just Stan Lee being witty and, hey man, whatever. December 28th, his birthday coming up, he'll be 94 years old, man. Whew. And on the 2nd of November, by the way, Steve Ditko, the co-creator of Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, coincidentally enough, along with Stan Lee, Steve Ditko just had a birthday on the 2nd of November. So, hey, happy post and pre-birthday to both of you guys. But yeah, guys, subscribe. I would like to have Stan Lee and Steve Ditko subscribe to my channel. Guys, we also had something that was a little bit more than an Easter egg. I know when people look at it and they just say, oh, well, that's cool. The soldier that in Iron Man 2, he was twisted around when Justin Hammer and Tony Stark were in Congress in the beginning. The guy who got twisted around the armor and snapped his spine, that very, very cringeworthy scene. That guy was mentioned when Doctor Strange was actually, right before the car accident, when he was in the car. He turned that one down. He said anybody could have done that particular operation. There was no glory in it. But the idea is that this is not just an Easter egg to say, oh, look, hey, we're mentioning that guy again. No, more specifically, they're mentioning it because it's telling you the time period that this was actually done in. So that means that Doctor Strange, when he had his accident, was just after or during the events of Iron Man 2. But then with all of his training that happened for a while afterwards, maybe that puts him in about the current time. Not sure, but that sets a timeline. It sets the precedent right there. So it was more than just a regular Easter egg. The question is, who were those other two people who were mentioned? Because that last one, schizophrenic with a chip in its head, in her head, and developing, some kind of things, that's pretty interesting. I'm wondering about that. Couple of Avengers Towers pictures in there. I expected that. That's not really that big of a deal to me, but it's cool. You could be like, oh, hey, look. Guys, this movie was so much like The Matrix. I mean, here you got the chosen one guy who was just destined to move forward. He's got the totally cool mentor who could do amazing things and says, oh my God, I know Kung Fu. And then they move on and do the things they got to do and fight this bad guy who's got a retinue of people and just, whatever. Like the similarities are impressive here. I really liked it because, hey, good movie. Good movie. And do you know they actually considered getting Keanu Reeves to play the role of Doctor Strange? I mean, wow, that would have been weird. Dude, I'm gonna pull a rabbit out my butt. But probably the coolest part in this was the idea that Dormammu was actually in the movie. Not just a little cameo thing like we thought in the beginning. If you guys saw my review of the most recent Doctor Strange featurette, yeah, this was so much more than that. It wasn't just a glimpse. He actually talked, he had a conversation, he argued, he threatened, he followed up on those threats. He killed Doctor Strange umpteenth times. I mean, that was insane. And the time loop, great idea. I liked that. And of course, Dormammu was played by Benedict Cumberbatch. I actually got to see the scenes if you looked online, and you got to see how he was doing it with the dots all over his face. But it was great. I loved that concept. I loved what they did with this. It was beautiful. And I want to point out something really cool. This was an Easter egg in itself. How, you say? Well, allow me to explain. This was a snub on Fox because, gee, look at this. A gigantic purple thing that's actually really cool and powerful versus the gigantic purple thing that was really big and stupid as all hell back in Fantastic Four Part 2, Rise of the Silver Surfer, right? I mean, that's how you do a gigantic purple thing. Not like this big purple fart cloud. No. This big purple monster that just kills the hero over and over again and finally relents because, oh no, I'm trapped. I mean, yeah, Fox, that's how it's done. Just saying. I was pleasantly surprised that I could count on like two hands how many people left the theater as the credits started rolling. I get so astounded every single time that I see just a single person get up and walk out. It's like, are you dumb? Do you not have friends? Have you never seen a Marvel movie before? Anyway, so we had Thor, and we knew this was going to be the case. There were so many rumors, so many pictures, and all that good stuff. Apparently, this was a scene out of Thor Ragnarok because we didn't actually see him with the thing that said 177A Bleecker Street. No, it was more than that. He was just already in there, and he had the beer. Well, first off, it was a cup of tea or whatever, and they got changed into beer, a gigantic flagon, and I kept on getting refilled, so that was cool. And he says, so Earth has wizards now, like he wasn't impressed, but he saw this keep on going, and he's like, oh, wow, hey. So I don't know that this is like uber magic, but Loki versus Doctor Strange actually happened in the comic way back when it was still in Strange Tales. So he wasn't yet the Sorcerer Supreme. He wasn't even close to how powerful he would eventually become. But Loki pretty much wiped the floor with him. So I wonder, how much does Doctor Strange know now? He's not the Sorcerer Supreme, technically, right? He hasn't been gifted that. He's just a regular old sorcerer. Mordo is still stronger than him. So what exactly do we do with that? But I think that was great. It was a very funny part where he says, "Oh, good, because I'm going to help you." And there was no question about it. I liked that. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the after credit scene, I liked, like I said, the idea that he went back and he took the power away from that guy. I was sad, because he worked so hard for that. But, it's kind of one of those things where it's like you were selfish. The world is not better off for you now. You are better off. And if you would have stayed and fought, well, maybe you would have died. But either way, sometimes we don't want to do things like that. And again, I do nothing but feel bad for that character in the story. At the same time, though, at least he gets to live. I don't know. Maybe he can do that again, the power again. Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, this does go along with other storylines. There have actually been several storylines, at least two off of the top of my head, where Baron Mordo has taken power from others, from other lesser mages, and made himself more powerful, powerful enough to even go against the combined might of Doctor Strange and the Ancient One. So since he's already more powerful than Strange, I would love to see what he does with all this amassed power as he's going around stealing this energy, taking it back from these other minor sorcerers. So that's something. Guys, all in all, I've seen this movie twice. I believe I may actually go, if I get some time, to see the movie again. I only got one of those figures. I might wind up trying to get the Astro one too. Actually, I'm pretty sure it'll still be available, but we'll see what happens. Maybe I can make a friend there. I also want to point out something. Somebody at the movie theater, one of the guys working behind the counter, if you did subscribe or you're showing up, hey, but he mentioned that he wasn't sure how astral projection worked because he never really followed Doctor Strange. He was always a big X-Men fan. That's great. If you watched X-Men, the television show back in the 90s, that cartoon, or if you've read the comics, you know that Professor X had the ability to let his spirit, his mind, come out of his body and travel around. And he fought against the Shadow King, and that was always his biggest fight on the astral plane. It's the exact same thing that Doctor Strange does. It's just a different means of doing it. They're both the astral forms and the ectoplasmic world. But the idea is that Professor X does it with his mind, with his telepathic powers through his mutant abilities, and Doctor Strange does it through a mystical means. So they're both the exact same thing, just different means of accomplishing the same goal. So yeah, if you understand the one, you'll understand the other. Anyway, guys, this movie was fantastic. Clearly, I'm looking to see it a third time. I just saw it in IMAX, and man, forget about it. It was better than seeing it in the regular theater. Can't wait till this comes on DVD or Blu-ray, excuse me, because yeah, that's going to be a grabber. Anyways, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, class dismissed.